I wish to welcome you to this live webinar brought to you by the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services in collaboration with the Bankers Association of Zambia. I am your host, Victoria Chandamumba, Chief Executive Officer of the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services. Now, we are all aware, I think, on this platform that COVID-19 has caused significant impact on the business world. It's not only in Zambia, it's not only in Africa, but world over. And the immediate impact from a business perspective has been the advocacy for investment in technological innovations. And this has enabled businesses to continue operating remotely and has brought about interactions through virtual platforms such as this, as opposed to the normal physical meetings and physical transactions. Now, during the COVID-19 period, specifically in Zambia, as was highlighted by the Central Bank of Zambia, there's been an increase during this period in digital financial transactions, particularly mobile money transactions, as compared to the pre-COVID era. This positive achievement of enhanced digital banking could also open a Pandora box of cybersecurity attacks, as we all know, exposing both the financial service providers as well as its customers to cyber risk. So the question we are really trying to ask here and answer is, how could this digital shift impact an organization's cybersecurity risk? It seems that going forward, cybersecurity will supersede physical security in terms of concern. We are privileged today to have an eminent panel that will help us delve into the key elements of this discussion, and these are key experts on the topic today. To help discuss this topic and answer the question, how can cyber resilience be enhanced for the financial sector? And with this in mind, digitalization and innovation during the COVID-19 pandemic, what risks and opportunities are at play for financial service providers? With me today on the panel, I'm privileged to have Christopher Lalusha. And now Chris is a dynamic leader who is well-grounded in all technology and business aspects with a proven track record of excellence. He is an innovative and accomplished technology and business executive, experienced in information technology management, banking operations, electronic channels, cash management, training, business development, telecommunications, and financial regulatory compliance. Christopher is currently the current Chief Information Officer or Head of IT for Absa Bank, Zambia. He has over 15 years of diverse financial services and technology background, including performance-driven results in IT management, project management, strategic planning, to mention but a few. Christopher, we are privileged to have you on the call today. And I think we'll learn a lot from you in terms of what we are here to achieve. So I wish to welcome you to the panel. You're welcome. You're welcome. Second on the panel, we have Akim. Akim is the head of operations at Zambia National Commercial Bank, the big, strong, and reliable. He is a driven IT professional with vast experience of over 10 years experience in financial technologies, fintech. So we are privileged that today Akim will really share with us what we need to know regarding the topic of the day. Akim, you're welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much, Victoria.
Thank you. Paul Luo is also another expert that we have on the panel today. He's an active member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and the Fraud Prevention and Security Subcommittee of the Bankers Association of Zambia. He is currently the head fraud and investigations at Atlas Mara Bank, Zambia. His career spans from many years back, serving in fraud risk management with the Anti-Corruption Commission, before he moved on to the banking industry in 1997, where he has served in various roles, including fraud risk management at Bank of Zambia, Barclays Bank, which is now Absa, Stanbic Bank, and currently with Atlas Mara. Paul, you're welcome to this panel.
Thanks, Victoria, and good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon. We have Mutsunge Zulu. He is currently the operations risk head at Stanbic Bank, Zambia, and he also serves as the National Secretary for the Economics Association of Zambia. Mutsunge is one of the critical voices behind the economic and risk analysis of Zambia's financial sector, specifically during this critical period of COVID-19. Mutsunga is a composite of many attributes. He's a seasoned banker, he's a financial analyst, he's an economist and a risk practitioner for more than a decade and a half. He has also worked in the market, operational and credit risk capacities for Standard Bank Africa regions. Mutsunga, if you're in the call, welcome to the panel. We have Nawa Samatebele. Nawa is coming from a regulator perspective. He's an expert in cybersecurity and is currently the manager cybersecurity at the Zambia Information and Communications Technology Authority, ZIBFS, which is a government-owned institution. He has over 13 years of professional experience and he has represented the government of the Republic of Zambia at several international conferences on cybersecurity matters, including the UNITU, the SADC, COMESA, and the AU. Nawa is also the first cybersecurity officer employed by the Republic of Zambia government in 2012, and he was instrumental in the setup of the Zambia Computer Incident Response Team, and now that is very critical for our sector in terms of combating cyber security fraud. He is also served in technical expert as in formulation of the first draft national cybersecurity policy. He's also participated in the e-commerce draft bill formulation and also the cybersecurity crime bill, data protection bills. Nawa, you're welcome to the panel.
Very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
And with that said, we'll listen to Nawa. I have with me Leonard Mwanza, a colleague and the moderator for this panel, and I'm your host, Victoria Chandamumba, Chief Executive Officer of the Zambia Institute of Banking and Financial Services. And now, before I hand over to you, Leonard, there is indeed serious concern on cyber fraud, and it's becoming, a huge concern for everyone, and it's not only for the financial sector, but it has affected the business, the SMEs, and everyone who is doing business, because the banks have said, deal with us remotely. Contact us as a bank, you're our customer, contact us through the virtual platforms. And this is becoming a concern for everyone, and we are glad to have, I think, a number of eminent people on the call and people representing various subsectors. I wish to recognize, I think, in the call, if you allow me, the chairman of the Alliance of African Institute of Bankers, connecting all the way from Nigeria, Mr. Se. We are welcome to the call, and thanks for being on the call, and various other colleagues in the call. So Leonard, I hand over to you to really delve into the nitty-gritties of our topic today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. A good afternoon to the panelists and also to the participants. Indeed, you put it very well. We've migrated into a digital economy, and as you know, it's developing at a very, very fast pace. And with it, it's coming along with some of the challenges you've already highlighted. We're talking about risks to businesses, risks to economies, risks to strategies, and the threat is now widely known as cybercrime. According to the Microsoft Digital Crimes Unit, there are nearly 400 million victims of cybercrime each year. And the world economy is losing a close amount of money to the tune of 500 billion United States dollars. That's too much money. Coming closer home, we are increasingly receiving a lot of reports on cyber attacks in our good economies in the regions like South Africa. So if you look at the South African market, in 2019 alone, they lost over 400 million rands. That's quite a lot of money. If you go to West Africa, Nigeria lost close to 500 million US dollars in 2019 alone. And when you go to East Africa, Kenya lost somewhere around 36 million US dollars in 2019 alone. Now, when you look at the global loss, the $500 billion, it is equivalent to the GDP of Africa's largest economy, nearly almost there, and that is Nigeria, and far higher than the GDP of the regional giant in Southern Africa, obviously even in Africa, South Africa. So when you look at those magnitudes, this is a very important topic, and we'd like to hear more about what's happening in the Zambian economy, what's happening in the financial services sector. And to kickstart this discussion, I'll call upon Chris. Chris, you've had attacks on the global economy. You've heard the figures within the African market. Would you start by helping us and the participants to understand what we mean by cyber resiliency, cyber attacks, and cyber security?
Thank you so much, Leonard. Indeed, this is a topical discussion. So cyber resilience is really the ability of an organization to be able to prepare, respond, and more importantly, recover when cyber attacks happen. So it speaks more to the ability of the organization to be able to defend itself, limit the effects of the attack, and guarantee continuity of its operation during and after the attacks. So you will see that in the recent past, especially with the COVID coming in, a lot of organizations have sent their staff to work from home. So these remote networking tools have also brought about a new platform from where these cyber attackers can launch an attack on an organization. In terms of an attack, it is where an organization is held siege by these cyber attackers. So that would include things like ransomware, whereby they encrypt all your data and they require you to pay, or maybe they get hold of your information and the business cannot continue. So in a nutshell, that is what cyber resilience is, but it is a very big part of the business continuity management tools that organizations usually have in place.
So you mentioned that it's an intrusion into business systems. I just wanted to know, in terms of why is it important for organizations, especially in Zambia, in the financial services sector, why is it important that they need to pay attention to issues of cybersecurity? I know you mentioned a few examples, but maybe you can highlight more on the major risks that are present within the financial services sector.
Okay, thank you so much. So it is one of those top concerns for top organizations. I think the WHO, Gartner, and even Forbes, even recently PwC, in their publications, they've highlighted that one of the most topical issues that is affecting organizations is cybersecurity. This is because this presents a risk whereby the organization is able to lose information. The organization is able to lose its reputation, and you basically also can get into problems with the law, whereby you face litigation. The European Union have put up things like the GDPR. Zambia is in the process of putting up a Data Protection Act. What that entails is that if anything happens to the personal information of the EU residents, or the Zambians in this case, when this act comes into effect, is that an organization can be penalized. And also with COVID and a lot of these processes moving to digital, you will see that a lot of organizations have upped their stakes in terms of digital and digitizing their processes. So this also opens up organizations to new risks. So you get the business getting concerned with having a digital presence, and sometimes this is what opens up these organizations to these attacks. So the risk there is that your whole organization can actually be brought to the ground if the design of these digital solutions does not take cybersecurity and security into consideration. Then you have things like increased networking, whereby the remote working, whereby most of the staff for most of these organizations are working from home, and then you add with some of the problems and challenges that probably will be there, like load shedding and so on and so forth. These people will then move from home and probably sit on cyber cafes or maybe airports to get free internet. That also exposes organizations to these attacks, because you don't know who actually is behind that free internet. And what then happens is that because that laptop is connected to the organization or is carrying organizational data, the organization is exposed. So organizations really need to make sure that they put in place controls to manage this remote working. Any remote working that is not really managed centrally by the organization is actually dangerous. So there's a need for increased reliance on the controls. So now when you talk about, for example, the digital platforms that I talked about, everyone is going out there releasing apps and so on and so forth. And in the past, the issue of carrying pen tests was the major issue. So people would just do a pen test and probably feel that it is safe. So it's no longer just safe to do a pen test. It is important that these controls that are put in place, they are tested oftenly. And organizations need to make sure that you sort of like have a way to detect. You need to think and behave like these hackers so that you then are able to protect the organizations from these attacks. That is why, given all that I've said, this cybersecurity issue is really a concern. It should be a concern. And as COBIT and probably the King 4 report says, this is now a topical issue even in organization in terms of governance structures. This is something that should be addressed and discussed at a very high level.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'll get back to you later, but I think you do highlight the importance of enhancing our internal controls, especially in this age where a number of staff are working remotely and we are migrating our businesses to digital platforms. Perhaps at this point in time, just a request to all the participants, if you need to have a clarification or you want to ask a question, you are free to post your questions and we'll come back to them later on. At this point in time, I'll call upon Akim. Now, Akim, we've seen a new trend in terms of people getting information or soliciting information, sending text messages, soliciting for individual information, maybe bank account details, their PIN. And some of those messages are looking at the weakest point of a human mind, which is commonly now being called social engineering. So we have seen a number of, an increase in terms of a number of cyber solicitation kind of messages that are flying around on mobile payment platforms in the country. Banks are migrating most of their services to mobile payment platform, digital payment platform. But at the end of it all, we're also seeing a number of unsolicited messages asking people to share sensitive information. And in the process, quite a number of people have lost their cherished funds. So perhaps what I want you to talk about is what are financial institutions doing to safeguard systems and also to ensure that customers' accounts are well protected? What sort of messaging are you sending out there to ensure that your systems and customers' accounts are well protected?
Thank you, Leonard. As introduced by Chris, this is a wide topic. And from a security perspective, there are a number of areas that financial institutions are looking at to make sure that customer accounts are safeguarded. So from a broader perspective, a lot of banks, a lot of financial institutions now are beginning to realize that it's important to have another eye that helps you go through all your systems, all your processes, and all the controls that you have to make sure that certain standards are adhered to make sure that there is limited way that customer data can be leaked, and also customer data can be protected. Some of these ways, Leonard, include that financial institutions now, you will note that a lot of them are beginning to make sure that they certify with the standards like ISO 27001 and PCI DSS for those that are dealing cards. That is to make sure that they conform to certain standards and make sure that they also bring in another eye that would then be able to make sure that they look through and come through and ensure that certain standards are adhered to. And it is a rigorous process that most organizations that have to undergo, and I happen to be one of those people that are happy that I come from one of those organizations, where that is considered a very important matter, and that every year you certify and make sure that controls and processes and vulnerabilities are looked at critically. But coming to your point, where you then talk about social engineering, where customers are being, for lack of a better word, duped into responding to certain requests and being able to release sensitive information. This has become very common recently, especially in our own country, Zambia as well. A lot of our customers have fallen prey to this. So some of the things that we've been doing as financial institutions include trying by all means to raise awareness to most customers. But you also understand that awareness alone may not be enough. So financial institutions have also been trying to make sure that what is it that they can actually do to actually make sure that should it be that the customer is duped into releasing this information, there is some sort of security around it that doesn't make it very easy for these social engineering hackers and teams to be able to get away with customer money. Some of these things that institutions are doing include, for instance, collaborating with MNOs and ZIBFS as the regulator to try and make sure that, for instance, one weakness that has been used most commonly is that when these perpetrators dupe customers and get sensitive information like PINs, they then go ahead and do SIM swap in some cases. So what has happened is that with a collaboration with ZIBFS and most MNOs, that area of SIM swap is actually being made so stringent, being made in such a way that the process itself deters a lot of people from going ahead. But financial institutions are not actually stopping there. There are a number of other financial institutions that have then gone ahead and said, look, let's add another layer on top of this scenario where should a hacker or should a social engineering personnel actually be able to get away with customer information, sensitive information like PINs, what else can actually be done? So there have been other techniques that are being deployed nowadays. Some of these techniques include being able to keep and collaborate with MNOs in terms of keeping the IMSI number, which is a very, very unique identifier that is tied to a particular SIM and phone number. That when these two are tied, that when these social engineering guys then get away with this critical information and then can do a SIM swap, they still find themselves into another problem that requires them to apply another methodology to get past that. And that has made it a little bit difficult. But there are also other areas that have been introduced by banks. A lot of banks are beginning to introduce one-time passwords, OTPs, as they are commonly known, to try and ensure that at certain levels, the OTPs could actually be requested. And depending on the scenario that applies, this acts as another second factor authentication methodology that actually then tries to deter these perpetrators from actually taking advantage of the actual information they got from the users at the time. There are so many other areas that institutions are trying to look at this issue. Institutions are now beginning to realize that it's a big issue and it's a sensitive issue. We are under attack. So there's quite a lot of what we've seen in the recent past. A lot of financial institutions are beginning to invest in a lot of IT security personnel to try and make sure that there's good enough investment in that area, and not only in the personnel, but also in the area of at least ensuring that there is equipment, there are assets and software that are actually in place to try and mitigate some of these scenarios that perpetrators that commonly use. But on top of that is also to try and make sure that part of this information doesn't get out in public or get out to the perpetrators easily. So try and put in a layer of protection around sensitive data. What kind of SMSs are sent there? To who are they visible? Put a layer that actually protects these particular areas too. Even from employees, in the cases where, in some cases, employees could actually be compromised and actually be the people that are releasing this information. And these are some of the things that financial institutions are trying to work on to try and make sure that these perpetrators are limited in a way they can take advantage of these vulnerabilities or weaknesses with our people, just to mention a few.
Yes, thanks, Hakim. A lot happening in terms of protecting systems, complying with the standard certifications. But then one would want to know, despite all what you've mentioned in terms of enhancing capacity, protecting systems, why then do we still see incidences of cybercrime intrusion? And I want to use the word intrusion, because on one hand, we are safeguarding our systems, but even with all the efforts to protect systems, and this is not just to Zambia, I think it's a global phenomenon, you still see systems being hacked, people penetrating these systems. I just want you to talk about it, much as you can assure us. Why is it that at the end of the day, we still see these systems being penetrated? We still see hackers managing to get into hard-proof systems. And perhaps as you provide an answer to that, after you, I think I'll ask Christoph also just to make a comment on
that. Thank you, Leonard. So, as you heard earlier, the definition of cyber resilience, one of the critical points about it is how do institutions recover from? So it's not really a question of if. I think it's now a question of when. When this happens, what you do, because I don't think there is anybody, especially now, these perpetrators, if I may call them, or if I'm allowed to use the word hackers, are becoming more and more sophisticated. And because they are becoming more and more sophisticated, at any one particular time, they then do have the understanding of what measures are in place. For instance, they will know what firewalls are in place. They will know what kind of applications do you run. They will possibly have them. They will be able to simulate and do certain things on those particular systems. And then they'll be able to build newer ways of actually attacking. And because they are always evolving, it also means that institutions need to also be evolving in a way that they respond to such matters. And so this is not an item that is likely to stop anytime soon. In fact, I don't see a stop to it. I think the question is, how do we minimize? How we minimize, for instance, if we take the area that you raised earlier on in terms of social engineering, one critical thing that I've seen most financial institutions do, and I come from one of them that is doing that, is to try and raise awareness. Let a lot of these customers, account holders know that under no circumstances will most of these financial institutions send you a funny email or a strange SMS asking you to release personal identification numbers, popularly known as a PIN, to anybody. That's not the normal way that most financial institutions would do it if they needed to do anything. In no way will they then ask you to go to Facebook and ask you to release information there. So a lot of it has got to do with how much awareness we can actually send out there to try and make sure that our people know and have this information with them so that they are conscious of all these phishing, social engineering techniques that actually exist nowadays. Why is it continuing? Remember, with the coming of COVID right now, with a lot of other areas, like I said, they are getting more sophisticated. People have realized there are a lot more people working from homes. There are a lot more people needing connectivity. And they are beginning to take advantage of that. A lot more people are becoming more free. They are isolated. And so the human mind works in such a way that every idle moment has got to be used in certain ways. And so a lot of them then find time to try and focus on what are the other hacking methodologies that they could actually use and what can they perpetrate and push that agenda. In terms of what financial institution can do is pretty much try and keep ahead as much as possible. But like I said, it's not an area where you can say you are ahead and you are safe. I think it's a question of how much controls can you actually put in place? How do you make sure that your vulnerabilities are reduced to a very minimal level? How do you then make sure that you are adhering to known weaknesses, vulnerabilities, known issues that actually then help you to actually ensure that you stay on top of the game? But like I said earlier on, you don't really stay on top because these guys are always innovating and evolving in the way that they attack. And yeah, it's normally a question of when. I think the most critical question then becomes, when this happens, how do you quickly recover without making sure that the service is not compromised or the service is not disturbed for customers? And how do you make sure that this particular issue is then handled well and the loops are closed? And how do you then move forward? And what lessons do you take from there? These are some of the critical areas. Why are they increasing? Leonard, these will continue increasing and this sophistication will continue as long as people know it's another form of ways of possibly making money, and it's all that they possibly do.
Thank you, Hakim. So I think it's a case of continuous improvement, being alert and not letting those. Chris, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, thanks, Leonard. I think in addition to what Hakim has mentioned, I think what would help organizations also is to make sure that they make this compromise and disruption difficult for hackers. So cybersecurity now doesn't just become as just as a topic that gets to be reported upon, but at the same way a system administrator sort of like looks at the systems every day, you are looking at cybersecurity on a daily basis. The way you make those compromises and disruptions difficult is whereby you know probably what the new trends are and you have technologies that help you to prevent that. But also I think collaboration is quite important. Working with various vendors that are established in this market will be key. We also need to look at the convergence in terms of what these digital innovations have done. Just here in the country, you've got a lot of integrations between the MNOs, the financial institutions. Now you're bringing in other third parties and so on and so forth. I think that institutions need to move beyond just securing their perimeters. They also need to look at these third parties and maybe even the fourth or fifth parties so that you start making security as your priority in all these designs. More importantly, I think in the BCM and the resilience that we've talked about, the aspect of being able to recover and reduce the impact of this is very important in the planning stage. And this has to, we always have to have the end in mind in designing this. That's what I can add to that, Leonard. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'll get back to you both. And for now, let me go to Paul. You have an advantage of seeing occurrences. We've talked about the increase in cyber crime. I just want you to help us bring out a perspective in terms of how both consumers and the financial service providers, what are the things they should be worried about? What are the things they should be concerned about? And probably just give us a highlight in terms of the common instances you are looking at within the Zambian market.
Thanks, Leonard. I think for purposes of context, the growing economies have got peculiar challenges. And these I would like to list as follows. There's a very low penetration rate in terms of internet, as well as IT literacy. This is speaking now to issues of people being unable to have the knowledge required for them to be aware about cyber attacks and cybercrime generally. There are also fewer resources devoted to fighting cybercrime, both at national and institutional levels. We also have high levels of unemployment and low wages, and there's also a less likelihood that we are able to prosecute cyber criminals successfully and cause sufficient deterrent for others who are intending to come into that space. Now, with the acceleration of the digital migration arising out of COVID, we're also seeing situations where entities are coming up on the digital side with very little or insufficient cybersecurity and monitoring capability in terms of managing the fraud aspect of it. So what, in my view, the players should be worried about and the consumers is not so much now the issue of phishing and social engineering alone. I think we are beginning to see bigger losses and very more sophisticated intrusion systems that are arising. And to answer your second part of that question, when you asked around what then are we seeing from the fraud management side in terms of cybercrime, yes, the very first of those will be the social engineering side. And these have to do with postings on sites that appear to be genuine and are trapping unsuspecting consumers to believe that they're coming genuinely from their service providers, where then they're divulging banking information and becoming victims to fraud. It doesn't help also that in the growing economies, and in Zambia in particular, our registration system in terms of national identity leaves a lot to be desired. We are not seeing very good control in the issuance of the national identity documents, as well as the registration of the SIM cards with the MNOs. So that is conspiring with the lack of awareness, the lack of knowledge around IT products to really cause a spike in cybercrime. We're also seeing the use of malware that is becoming common, where users are clicking on links which have got malicious softwares that then come up on their networks, and they're able to access information on those networks. We're also seeing the use of backdoors in terms of softwares that allow for remote access into networks, particularly for the financial institutions, where colossal amounts of monies are being lost through hacking remotely and gaining access remotely. We also have day zero exploits. Now, this refers to vulnerabilities that have been identified in networks and systems, but have not been patched or rectified in good time. And we're seeing more and more that the internal persons, the staff, etc., are also taking advantage of these vulnerabilities and causing losses to both their employers as well as the consumers of the financial services from the financial service institutions. I think chiefly those are the areas we're seeing higher risk of late.
Thank you so much. I'll get back to you later. I think at this point in time, I'll move to Mutisunge. Welcome, Mutisunge.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Great, great, great. So, as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is said to have provided threats and opportunities. And most people are saying it's providing a new way of thinking, a litmus test for financial institutions as they develop digital strategies. Would you say banks are fairly prepared for the pandemic effects, especially are they ready to absorb the risks that digital perspective is bringing to the market?
Thank you for that question. And I'll be very honest, this industry has, is it 18 or 19 banks? So yes, COVID environment is providing opportunities because then we are now beginning to serve clients in a contactless environment. But the question is, do we have platforms? There's a tier of banks that had already started investing in technology pre-COVID. No one knew that COVID was going to come. Those are the ones that are reaping the benefits and are celebrating, saying, oh, we thought about apps, we thought about going digital. But then there are banks that were caught napping, and this is when they will probably look at wanting to expedite any investments. Yes, COVID was a black swan event. So you have a string of banks that are now having their digital strategies tested. So how resilient is your digital strategy? Of course, there's no bank that will come out in the open and say, we were caught napping and this is when we want to do everything. Everyone will try and showcase a little bit of technology that they've invested in. But truth be told, I think it's been a wake-up call for most banks, because this is when people are thinking of decongesting, say, ATMs. I know that there's been regulation that has come from the central bank, increasing the appetite for usage of electronic money. But the reason being, we don't want people to start handling cash. But let's not also forget that banking is also behavioral in a sense. So even if you create all these digital platforms, there's still a tier of clients that believe that they believe in going to the actual building where the money is, you know, like the old at heart. And so it's a struggle which banks are also trying to get to navigate. And I think the other thing is, in terms of processing, let's not just look at it in terms of people getting cash from the bank. There are facilities, for instance. I mean, if a client comes for a facility, there's facility letters. The question is, how are you executing those things if people are working from home? So you'd find that there are units that are operating from home, but they still need to be able to, you know, provide services like sign letters. So you find that that's an opportunity for electronic signatures. People are able to sign things via electronic means. This is where things like Adobe are coming into play. Meetings are still continuing. There's that interface. How are you meeting your clients? Do your clients have Zoom? Do they have Microsoft Teams? Because in such an environment, you won't be able to have the regular meetings with your clients like face-to-face, because you really want to social distance and you want to save a wider expanse of clients. So you'd find that in terms of operational resilience, that's where now those discussions come in. And then the other thing is, because people have to work from home to ensure that financial services do continue, the question is, do they have the right platforms? Are they able to do exactly what they were able to do in the office, but from the home setting? So we're talking things like access to systems. But then as we talk about access to systems, some of my colleagues, the earlier two speakers talked about, that's where now your cyber issues then come in to say, how safe is it? What kind of internet am I using? You know, even as you have your team meetings, for example, your Zoom meetings, how confidential are they? You could be married to a person who's from the competitors and you're discussing a deal and your competitors also are interested in that deal. How are we ensuring that there's privacy? You see, so all those concerns then come into play. They talked about the integrations. There's integrations with the MNOs and things like that. So for as long as you have a system, you always have those threats. And the question now that everyone is asking themselves is, it's time to calculate return on our technology investments. Are we able, if I asked a bank today and say, what is your return on investment in terms of technology? Do they have those numbers? So you find that COVID is changing our mindsets. We're beginning to think differently. We're beginning to look at cyber resilience, cyber security, and IT as an enabler and a partner rather than being a cost driver. Thank you, Chief.
You've raised quite a number of issues. It's not just about system security. We've changed the way we work. We've changed the way we interact with our customers. And we are, as we are doing now, relying on digital platforms to move businesses, to engage our potential clients. Everything now is digitalized. I want to think that it calls for a very, very robust cybersecurity framework that goes beyond just payment platforms, digital payment platforms. It's now about protecting the virtual meeting platforms.
Yes.
Are we safe and confident that our employees are operating in safe environments in their own homes? What's going on? That could be a weakest link. So perhaps I'm seeing multiple weaknesses within that new architecture of working, the systems, environment. I just want you to maybe speak to what could be the weakest point in this new architecture, in this new way of doing things, because I know Akim and Christopher who look at, they are working at safeguarding their systems. Not so sure whether institutions have control on meeting platform like Zoom, they've got control on meeting platform like Microsoft Teams. Please, can you just highlight to us from a risk framework, where is the weakest point in all this architecture?
Thank you. So they said the strength of a chain is measured using the weakest point. So there'll be various weakest points, but for me, I think it's the contact and the vulnerability, and that's why we talk about vulnerability assessments. Maybe let me take you a little bit backwards. So maybe people would be wondering, why is a risk person also on a cyber type of core? So risk has oversight over all risks, including cyber risks themselves. So risk will play a very, very, very key part. From framework perspective, you need buy-in from top management. That is why you find that for certain organizations, you all go up to as high as board IT. You need IT buy-in. Boards need to have IT specialists who can speak that language. Because if I'm not an IT specialist, then how do I talk about the funding discussion? If I say I need these types of controls and they cost $2 million, people will shoot me down and say, we are better off building extra branches. But you and I know that brick and mortar is not the way to go. It's about integration, and that's how you reach the person with banking services in Kaputa, for instance. So that in itself, organizations use different systems. So I think one that cuts across is usually Microsoft. And if you use Microsoft, then you will leverage off some of their packages like Microsoft Teams. And the protection you will get will leverage off whatever Microsoft is doing. Others will use Zoom, others will use Skype, depending on what you use. But then the nature of this area, one of my colleagues earlier spoke and said, these criminals are constantly a step ahead of us. They don't sleep. This is lucrative business. And that's why you find that every time there's something new that is coming up, it's as easy as clicking on a link that you don't know. I think there was a question that someone asked and said, how can we really be safe? We can't really be safe in this world. And that's why this is also given the oversight of risk, because it's risky. If I go and click on a link, imagine I would have run all my pen tests, I would have done everything that I need, but just because one individual in the organization who clicked on an unsafe link could give access to a cyber criminal and your whole system. And that's what I meant by the strength of a chain is measured using the weakest point. So it takes so much awareness. We shouldn't relent. Awareness must be an everyday thing. Awareness. Do we do compliance tests for our staff? Do we, educate them? Do they understand what cybercrime is? And you see, this is where now as risk managers, as risk heads, and as, banking staff, we think about having to provide capital because it's a risk. So the same way you would be scared to go and lend an individual you don't know money thinking that they will never pay back, and you start providing capital for that vulnerability, is the same way organizations in the world need to start providing capital. And this is where the capital discussion becomes very key. But because we don't do so well when it comes to data, models cannot be calibrated accurately to give me the optimal amount of capital that I need to hold against cyber risk, because cyber risk has the capability of crippling the entire organization. My colleague did mention that ransomware, all you need is to click on a link, access, your hackers will just get all your data, including all the deals and your customers' account numbers, and they'll tell you, pay us X amount. And then what if that's the only money you have in the bank? So you find that from a capital perspective, this is a very, very topical discussion, which also points to regulators. Because we are bankers and operate in a banking environment, the question is, from a framework perspective, I don't think as a country we've done very well. And this is when we are waking up to cyber. I think if I compare Zambia to the likes of Kenya, we are a little far behind. And I think the institutions that are really doing well are those ones that are maybe of international origin, like you've got parents that you leverage off. So if you're an international bank and you follow what your parent is doing, say for example, if your bank is based, your head office is in London or South Africa, then you start to leverage off some of those things that they are doing. But then there is a gap in terms of framework. The framework needs to be expedited, and this is where the likes of the ZIBFS, the Bank of Zambia need to come in and ensure that we start to tighten these frameworks, because this is I'll tell you one thing. This is said as a joke. One person once joked and says the next financial crisis will be cyber. Someone will just hack into the system and wipe your entire accounts, and then you will have no capital. So you'd see that that's why it's a very critical area, and it's gaining momentum. It's linked to business disruption, BCM and everything. So it's something that needs to be taken very, very serious, and it's a discussion for the boardroom. IT, risk, all executives need to start taking these things serious in terms of prioritization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sunga. I'll get back to you, but you raise a very important point that we need to elevate the discussion of issues of cybersecurity and elevate its position from a mere operational matter to a critical issue that needs board governance oversight. Let's listen to the regulator. I think you've heard about what's happening in the financial services sector. All eyes are on you. You are the regulator, and we all look up to you in terms of understanding what's happening in the cyberspace. You control the cyberspace in the country. You understand what comes in and what goes out. So there is an increase in the appetite for digital payments, electronic transactions, as we've already highlighted. Financial institutions are deploying to digital payment platforms, digital offsite working solutions, and everything else we've talked about. But we've also talked about the fact that there's an increase in fraud risks. I think Sunge did elaborate that more. What is the role of ZICTA in the prevention and identification of cybersecurity risks in the country, and in the management of digital fraud risks that could have some impact on financial institutions' digital strategies? Over to you now.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Good afternoon, everyone. Very interesting discussion and very interesting question. Let me start by saying this is a space that's regulated by two entities. ZICTA on one end, in terms of the information security management of systems, and you've got the Bank of Zambia. Okay, now we don't control. I just want to correct that statement. We merely regulate. I think a lot of interesting points have been highlighted, of which I was going to touch on. Akim mentioned on the collaboration they've had. I think you attest to that in terms of coming up with strategies in stopping mobile frauds in terms of SIM swaps. Sunga, I think, touched on the point of frameworks that should be in place, in which I believe, I think some banks will attest that as of recent, I think in July, they must have received some notification from Bank of Zambia looking into their cybersecurity posture. These are things that, yes, you might say we've delayed in coming up to the fore, but these are things that are happening in the background. And I believe this is a precursor to what a survey that we had set out in 2018, where we wanted to collaborate with the banks and understand what's happening on the infrastructure. It might seem trivial to answer in a manner of saying we are taking awareness as one of the major strategies, But as you had actually, I don't know whether it was yourself or Mr. Paul had highlighted in terms of the ICT literacy in the country. Awareness plays a big part in being able to mitigate some of these losses or frauds that you're seeing. That's one strategy we're working on. And I think you've seen in the past where certain banks have sent out these messages. On the other hand, where are we sitting, and what we've come to notice is the perpetrators are using social media platforms such as Facebook, and I'll maybe later on share some statistics on what we've seen. So we've partnered with Facebook, in which we're able to identify certain perpetrators hiding in certain jurisdictions, through which we've also signed MOUs with certain countries to help fight the part of attrition to who's conducting these attacks from their jurisdiction. In country, we're working closely with the Bank of Zambia. We do have an MOU, and through this MOU, as being experts in ICT infrastructure protections, we've been able to share certain knowledge that we do have. I mean, this is an ongoing process. So in summary, we're working with Bank of Zambia, and we've come up with certain strategies in which we're trying to identify certain risks and attack methods that fraudsters are using.
Okay, we will get back to Nawa, probably maybe so that can try to log in and we get him a bit more clearer. I'll get back to Paul. You mentioned quite a number of issues when we discussed earlier on. Just how do you see the cybersecurity landscape unfolding as we move forward? I know we are all going digital in everything. Perhaps your focus was on protecting customer information, banking systems. Perhaps now your work will be more broadened because you now even have to ensure that other platforms are as secure as possible to avoid intrusion. Can you share with us in terms of how you view the cybersecurity landscape unfolding post-COVID-19?
Thanks, Leonard. We are in different spaces currently, depending on where the financial institution is. I think now alluded to those entities with group structures and with the experience in better markets, who are now being held by the hand by their group structures to move through this. Then we have, in the majority of cases, financial institutions that are on their own. They operate locally and they began business locally. These are the institutions that are worrying, because what we will expect to see in the near future is a lot of knee-jerk reactions as incidences happen. Most of these reactions are going to happen in very siloed structures within the product systems and designs that have been affected, and will not really work well in forestalling the actual risks that these entities are going to face. Because of this, I believe we are going to have a lot of regulatory intervention from ZICTA and Bank of Zambia, as well as the other institutions that may come on board to regulate the space. And we are going to see a lot of standardization in terms of requirements, particularly after vulnerability assessments are done. Then we will know where the institutions that are most vulnerable are and what the requirements are going to be. It is only after that happens that we are then probably going to start seeing long-term and strategic approaches that are going to contain the problem in a better way than it's currently being handled. So I'm seeing the landscape in terms of cybersecurity unfolding in that fashion. There's going to be a bit of panic in currently and in the near future, and then we shall stabilize with a lot of regulatory oversight to ensure that these risks don't go too far.
Thanks so much, Paul. Chris, from what we are discussing, it's becoming clear that cybersecurity is an issue. Organizations need to build resilience. Could you just talk about what organizations should be doing to make sure that they manage these increased risks associated with cyber risk, especially in the new normal where we are actually moving digital almost in everything that we do as businesses?
Okay. No, thanks, Leonard, for that question. So I think it's the new normal has actually brought about changes in terms of how people are working. I mean, it's fair to assume that a lot of organizations now have a lot of staff working from home. This in itself brings about issues around the business itself. If the business suffers, there will be no company or organization to even put up these cybersecurity resiliences that we were talking about. So I think what is critical now is that companies really put up these business continuity management controls to ensure that business continues and they take advantage of this situation to probably be more profitable. We're also having a situation around COVID having had an impact on, for example, the supply chain. Right now, equipment, if you're ordering equipment from EU and so on and so forth, this is not coming forth in the timelines that we normally would expect things. Things are now taking 6 months and longer. So now you can imagine if you needed spare parts for your critical services, and these can't come in when you need them. So I think organizations need to really widen this aspect in terms of looking at that risk. This is where I think even the local economy can benefit from, if we can have local manufacturers, suppliers that can step up to fill up this gap. But I think it's worth looking at in terms of if some of the resiliences that we think of are that somebody can fly you a part from South Africa or from Europe and you get it within a day, well, that now is not going to happen. So it means that we need to rethink that, okay? Then we have higher numbers of these workforces working remotely. Like I think Mtisunge mentioned, the biggest threat that organizations face are actually the insiders. Most of these frauds that we've had reported in the industry are because these hackers have found a way of working with people inside. Now, the Bible says someone to say, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Maybe just to make a point around, the biggest hackers you have are actually inside, because inside, if they do decide to take you down or to compromise your controls, they can really mess up the whole organization. So I think up and above these awarenesses that we talked about earlier, I think organizations need to look at retraining people, their staff. It has to be a cultural issue now, and attestations have to be given. Like now I said, I think awareness cannot be downplayed. It's a big part of what needs to happen, because even just the customers, if we can get to an extent where the customers are able to tell that this is a phishing attempt, they're able to tell that this is a fake website, they're able to tell that this WhatsApp number does not look like my bank's number, then we're getting somewhere, because then we'll stop it there. And it speaks to some of the issues I mentioned earlier, where we're able to stop these attacks right from there. So I think also the issue of cybersecurity, up until now, cybersecurity IT governance structures have really been a topical issue in most organizations. If you look at COVID-5, for example, the King 4 reports as well, they place the issue of cybersecurity and IT strategy as a board issue now. So it means that we need to have organizations we look at the cybersecurity strategy with a view of having everyone come to the party. This is no longer about technical jargon or cybersecurity specialists speaking in their own language and not carrying anyone along. this now affects the business. Remember, if the business goes down, there is no resilience that we can build because the organization won't just be there. So I think that it's high time that organization looked at this issue of cybersecurity in terms of how does it fit in this organization. Now, the other aspect is the design principles. I think it's very important that organizations start looking at getting things right at the point of designing. You will have systems that probably are being bought off the shelf. Some of them are getting designed. Most likely, you will have that the organization will be focusing more on getting to market, and they might not really pay particular attention to the vulnerabilities. It's very important that that is taken. So things like standards, policies to ensure that things before they are launched, there's a way of ascertaining to say, we have done all we could to secure the environment. Also with remote working, most of the people, you'll find that these laptops or workstations are not getting patched. Now, these hackers that we're talking about, they take advantage of any opportunity that shows up. So I think organizations need to look at this issue of vulnerability management and also patching. If it means that you need to put up deliberate policies to get your staff to come in and patch these machines every now and then, it's very important that we get to a level where they are able to detect what machine is not meeting these controls. And then lastly, I think the issue of the budgets, these are things that also need to be looked at. With everybody working remotely and COVID hitting everyone hardly, I think the businesses are mostly focusing on continuing with the business. So it's very possible that issues of security, issues of IT security might not be a priority right now. So I think that it's important that we retrace and we rethink that aspect. I think security needs to be, especially in these times, because hackers are not sleeping. You've got organizations like WHO getting some of their staff accounts compromised because hackers want to get those to get the funding or divert the funding. So no one is spared, but I think that it's important that we look at that as an investment, because if we get to a level where our information is secure, our customers' information is secure, we'll get to a place where I think everyone will gain confidence in our organization. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Chris. Now, are you back? Maybe can you try audio so that we probably can proceed with you?
Apologies for that. I'm back.
Thank you so much. You were talking about the collaborations you are having with the central bank to make sure that you are able to keep a tab on what's happening on the cybersecurity space in the country, and also other international collaborations, which is good for the financial sector. As you do those collaborations, do you think ZICTA can be trusted, that you possess the right skills, the right equipment to help you to deter and describe cyber intrusions in the country?
Thank you for that question. I'll maybe start from the skill. We do have the skills. We actually have some of the best digital incident response officers in the country that can reverse engineer malware, as well as set up intrusion detection systems themselves. However, us possessing those skills or those equipments does not in itself guarantee security in the country. Remember, we don't own these systems. And that's why I think I started by mentioning we merely regulate. We don't control communication systems, right? Because, for example, the internet infrastructure, the critical information infrastructure itself, most of it is in the private sector. So how would we know what's happening on systems that are owned, for example, by the banks? From our standpoint, we would not be able to see what's going on unless we've got that established collaboration. And from that end, that's where we are working with Bank of Zambia. One of the other strategies, as the law actually does mandate ZICTA, is to conduct annual audits. I think banks such as Standard Chartered or Citibank will attest to this. This process started last year around November, and it will be ongoing this year. Unfortunately, COVID did interrupt some of these sessions, but rest assured, we'll be coming to conduct these risk assessment measures that are required as stipulated in the law, right? But suffice to say, it is not about us having the skills that will speak into us being secure. It also entails about the stakeholders, being yourselves in the financial, willing to collaborate and cooperate with regulators. When incidents do happen, for example, we've come to find out certain issues that have happened in the financial sector. When law enforcement do request for our support in establishing how either a hack or an incident did happen, not that the stakeholder came and reported to the regulator, of which, yes, I do understand, and we do understand as a regulator that financial matters are quite sensitive and you do not just want to be open, but that's where I think the issue of trust comes in. We are not there to announce your losses or incidents that are happening in the banking so that the public loses confidence. We're there to help build that confidence, but it's about you and established stakeholders being able to share what's happening, and we can bring in our systems. For example, right now, for our viewers, there is a subdomain we're running, and you can actually see the live attacks that are happening on some of our sensors we've placed with partnering institutions. If you go to alert.cirt.zm, /3000, that's the port address, you're going to see live attacks happening on one of our intrusion detection systems. And from where they actually originate, this is a system that's been built by ourselves, by the ZIBFS team. Now, it's a free service, and we've been announcing this to several stakeholders saying, look, let's put a sensor on your network that will help us analyze what's going on in terms of threats, and will help collaborate with yourselves and help you identify before attacks do actually happen on your real systems. So in terms of capacity, skills, I think the government does have through ZIBFS, and it's just a matter of establishing strong collaboration and support from other stakeholders.
So thank you. Now, at least we can be assured that you are proactively monitoring intrusions, and those that wish to access your services are more than welcome. But you do realize, I think, from the way we've been discussing, that cyber attacks are not just an IT issue. It's an issue, it's an economic issue. It affects livelihoods as well. Do you have a tab in terms of the value of losses perhaps Zambia has been exposed to in the recent past? And we are not talking about specific institutions here. We just want to have a generality. Are you, as a regulator, in a position to tell us the sort of losses we've been suffering as a country?
Thank you. I think, let me give you an example. I won't speak much into which institutions as usual, but maybe let's start with this year. I can tell you there are certain institutions we've lost over 50 million kwacha to fraud-related incidents this year alone in the financial sector. Okay, we witnessed in 2018 certain institutions that lost over $250,000. Now, these are certain cases that came to our fore when we're conducting incident response and forensic analysis in collaboration with the law enforcement. The problem we've noticed is institutions are not coming forward. There's also been an issue of where certain institutions that are mandated to oversee certain sectors are not coming forth sharing this information. But I do believe the losses are actually much higher than what we've just found out in terms of our usual collaborations with the law enforcement. So we've noticed this problem. And now what we've done is we've set out MOUs with key stakeholders, like for example, FIC. We've got DEC, as well as the Anti-Corruption Commission, so that we can gather all these statistics and be able to see what kind of picture is happening in terms of incidents that are happening. And through Ministry of Finance, I think with this kind of understanding of the kind of losses we're facing, issues of budget to support this cause of cybersecurity within government and the private sector will be adequately addressed.
Thank you. Now, it's clear from your answer that Zambia is not immune to cyber attacks. We are losing quite a lot of money from the examples you've given. Do you have any plans as ZICTA to come up with cyber resilient regulations in order to protect businesses as we move forward?
Yes, we do, and I'll say this. From the standpoint of the law, ZICTA is mandated to ensure risk assessment matters are undertaken by critical infrastructure, which as of now, I'll speak since we're talking into the financial sector, all financial institutions are actually mandated by the law in the ECT Act of 2009, number 21, that they should be submitting their risk assessment procedures to us. Okay, but in terms of that, we noticed there were shortfalls in the law. Hence, I think you've heard in media, and I think where our Honorable Minister did at one point mention that the cyber security and cybercrime regulations, bills, have been accepted in principle by Cabinet. And I believe something is happening. I won't speak into it, but we should be seeing something happening in a few weeks or months in relation to that matter. On top of that, we've been working with Bank of Zambia, and I think you've noticed, as I did allude to, there's a cybersecurity framework questionnaire that was sent recently. All these are measures that are speaking to what actually started in 2018 through our cybersecurity survey. More so, we're developing more detailed information security guidelines that should be coming out hopefully in the either the end or the beginning of fourth quarter of this year, to try and address certain issues we've noticed. Additionally, since we also noticed that institutions have been working in silos, we have been in talks with Bank of Zambia as well as with BAS in setting up a financial cert. Now, we do realize there are certain things that should not be shared with the public, okay, amongst institutions. So through these platforms, we hope certain attacks that, for example, one bank has been hit using one attack vector, it should not stop that bank from sharing that threat with another bank. So through these measures, we hope some of these incidents we're seeing will be reduced. I say reduced, as everyone, I think I'm happy when I heard from Sunga, when I heard from yourselves actually, where you mentioned even Akim, cybersecurity is not 100%. You can never say you'll never be hacked. Actually, what we do say in our circles is it's a matter of time. It's how you react and how quick you are to detect an attack. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, at this point in time, perhaps I would like to give viewers an opportunity. I'll hand over to Victoria just to read some of the questions that are being posted. Then thereafter, the panelists can answer to some of the questions that will be specific and addressed to them. Victoria, over to you.
Thank you so much, Leonard. I think the conversation has been quite fruitful, and it's clear that cybersecurity is everyone's concern, and there are various comments in the chat to which panelists can speak to. Before I get started, I'll throw it to Mutsunge. I think checking through the chat, you can speak to some of the questions that are highlighted that are bordering on the risk management element, or what you can speak to. So Mutsunge, you can pick out some of the questions, and then I'll come in to read the rest of the questions.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll start with there was one from Mr. Emmanuel Siameja. I know it was a private message around the split between the role of chief information officer and head of IT. Apparently, he was questioning, say, one of the panelists holds a dual role, you know. So I know that, and my response is that we need to also take into account the size of the organization, you know. Taking on additional staff, of course, comes at a cost. So some organizations will have a chief information officer who's at the top. So CIO, CTO is the same thing, or a chief technology officer, who can also serve as head of IT. When your organization is vast, it could be justifiable to have two different people, because then you have the muscle to pay them. But if your organization is small, say you are running a bank with only 2 branches, there's no way you can be having a chief information officer and a head of IT. So there's also the discussion around optimization. And that's the reason why I think in my response, I said, we need to take these discussions at board level, because then the chief financial officer needs to be in the know, because when it comes to cyber discussions, when it comes to IT units, there's an element of cost. You can't talk about controls. Controls cost money. And that's a discussion that should be in the budgeting process of any bank, so that when you're saying, oh, I need these controls, I need to do penetration tests, we need to get KPMG to come and do pen tests, you will pay KPMG, they won't do it for free. So that's where I wanted to clarify, to say, yes, I don't have a problem with the view that one is holding dual roles. But then, I mean, it's like the question around risk, to say other units will have risk separate, others will have audit, others will have compliance, others will have risk and compliance, others will have risk and audit. So at the end of the day, it's really about understanding who's in the first line, the second line, and the third line. And that's the basis of risk management. And you'll find that audit falls in the third line, risk is in the second line of defense, and the front line are the business themselves in front. So when you understand those lines of defense, then it will make your frameworks very easy to be implemented, and you will embed the right culture, and you will use this same structure to be able to address cyber risks and any other risks. So I just wanted to make that very clear.
Thank you, Mutsunge, and I think that's a critical clarification. There's also another question from Kingston, and it's going to the regulator. He's saying that we are seeing an increase in the usage of mobile transactions, and I'm sure this is to do with mobile money, and the standards are commonly known, DSS, which are being used, PCI, which focus on payments through cards. How is the regulator controlling and monitoring compliance, and what laws are being applied now? Maybe you can do a comment on that now.
Thanks for that. I think let me try, start by mentioning a practical thing. In 2018, around November, I think certain people did witness, and maybe it's been happening, but on a lower level, where certain fraudsters were sending SMSs purporting they've lost their mobile number, or they need some mobile money transferred to a certain number, because you know the social engineering type. So from ZIBFS perspective, when we did notice that, what we had directed the MNOs, the MNOs, and I think I'm going to speak on the mobile money operators, was to reduce the amount that can be transferred per transaction. That aspect is twofold. Bank of Zambia also has regulation, I believe, in relation to how mobile money processes are conducted. And I believe from a threat point of view, you might all agree with me that going to a mobile money booth and writing your name in a book with your NRC detail is a threat in itself. However, there is, I think, a policy that does mandate that transactions are written in a book for all to see. For me, all it would have to take is go with a pair of glasses, with a camera or anything like that. I can barely just look or blink and get all those records. That's a threat. Now, when we notice that, because we're not privy to the setup, because mobile platforms do go through Bank of Zambia, we did sit down with Bank of Zambia and say, look, we need to address this threat point. These are things that we've noticed and are now working hand in hand with Bank of Zambia to say, from a policy and procedural point, this might look okay, but when you take it to cyber, this is actually a threat. So the collaboration is now looking at every process, and as Christopher had mentioned, the banks might have all the best security measures in place, but because of the convergence of systems, the weakest point being the mobile platforms themselves, the threat will come from that end. So now we're trying to look at security, not just from one sector's point of view, but looking at the whole entire ecosystem. And we're reviewing all that in hand with Bank of Zambia. There are several points I think I might address, but might not be appropriate for this platform because of security concerns. But I believe in another forum, when I sit with Buzz and heads of departments like Christopher, I'll highlight certain threats, not coming from their side, but maybe coming from the MNOs that are kind of exposing them. And we're gonna address those. So I think for now, that's how best I can say, bring it up without bringing more vulnerabilities.
So that's indeed awesome. And with that in mind now, before I let you go, there is a question from Emmanuel to say, is there any insurance, companies that are offering cybersecurity insurance in Zambia specifically?
Thank you, Emmanuel. I think from as much as I know so far, I'm not sure of any insurance company that local that's providing cyber insurance. I know some international companies do offer this, but I think this is a new discussion that we'll be having with the insurance sector on how they can come on board to provide this. I mean, it's a good market for them. It will bring business for them, but it also will offer a new kind of control, I think, for stakeholders who are investing in their business processes in cyber. Maybe I also just take this chance to respond to another question. I've been asked, has ZIBFS conducted a trend list on current frauds taking place? I might just speak into that. 2019 report actually did highlight that we had 503 DFS fraud-related cases. I can tell you as of now, before I think the final report is issued, this year alone, we've seen over 700 cases related to digital finance, attempted frauds, or incidents that have actually happened. So as I mentioned earlier on, this is a matter of collaboration that will take us forward. I've also noticed another question relating where someone mentioned it's not about, sorry, if I may just quickly read it. He said, I think the issue isn't about collaboration, but what is ZIBFS doing as the regulator, as you're communicating adequate controls and mitigations that we must adhere to? As I mentioned, the ECT Act in itself does stipulate that risk management strategies and auditing should be conducted. I'll say it again, in Zambia, we've worked with the Zambia Bureau of Standard, and the benchmark framework that we're following is actually the ISO 27001 2013 standard. This is because this standard cuts across all different sectors. I know with the banking and financial sector, you probably need more standards to be followed in terms of PCIDS controls and other standards. That's good. But the bare minimum that we follow when we're conducting audits is the ISO 27000 and 2013 standard. Suffice to say, it doesn't mean because you're certified, I think even Chris had mentioned this, that your systems are secure. Cybersecurity is an ongoing process every day. If you were to ask me, is Zicta secure right now? My answer is we're secure as the last time I checked the logs, which was early this morning at 7. There could be a chance that we could be hacked. I'll actually not shy away and tell you right now, we've also faced a hack attempt before. Not successful, but we have managed to thwart some of these attacks. So it's not that because we are the cybersecurity regulators, we never get hacked. It does happen, but we do quickly recover, as Chris did mention. So I think this is a good discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much now, and I think that's quite insightful. I'll get to Akim. There is a question, I think, bordering on the identity of your customer, which begins with the NRC, like here in Zambia, the National Registration Card, which identifies a customer, and it's linked to account opening. Now, the question to you as a practitioner and in the bank or representing financial institutions is that, are you collaborating with a government department that issues a national registration cards in order to track down the real identity of your clients when admitting them as bank clients? If Akim, you can comment to that, and if there is a comment that would need, maybe Chris can throw in a word also.
Thanks, Victoria. Let me put it this way. So the NRC identity is used as the national identity, and so most financial institutions use it as the unique identifier for a lot of customers. But I think the issue that is coming out is that the process we currently have that is followed to issue the NRCs sometimes has had issues where, for instance, we've had issues where the same NRC number is issued to more than one person, or the NRC number is not actually the correct one. So those incidences, yes, they've been picked up, and yes, there's been collaboration to try and find out how they happened, and those issues are raised. But I think for me, coming from speaking on security issues, security matters, and coming from an IT background, what is most interesting is what is now the message that is coming from government, which is very attractive, to say that there is going to be digitization of these NRCs, because that's where there lies what we then need to harness as financial institutions in terms of how can we then utilize these identities to full capacity and make sure that we ring fence all the vulnerabilities or all the loopholes that currently exist. So I may not be very sure to give you where exactly government is, maybe if somebody is aware where it is, but the pronouncements have been said that the process of trying to digitize the NRCs is actually being considered. I'm not exactly sure where that process is, but immediately when that happens, it is a very big clincher. It is a very big thing for a lot of financial institutions, including the one I come from, that then we can utilize a way of validating and ensuring that when a person says, this is my ID, that can be verified, and therefore then we'll be sure to say that we're using a twinning ID for that particular person, because then there are a number of other integrations that can be put on top of that will make this more secure in the process, secure a lot of customer accounts, or secure a lot of accounts for the customers going forward. So we are looking forward to that. But at the moment, it's a tricky one. But until that happens, then we'll be able to harness the full potential and make sure that those loopholes are ring-fenced in full. Maybe also allow me, Victoria, I've seen there's a question I think seems to be a misunderstanding that I talked about ISO, what banks are doing in terms of making sure that we conforming and making sure that the security, we are adhering to a lot of security matters. And I talked about ISO 27001 certification. I talked about PCI DSS certification, but then there seems to be a misunderstanding that those are the only things that I said, those are the only things that financial institutions are doing to make sure that they actually stay on top of all these cyber attacks. Not necessarily. I did also go on and state that a lot of financial institutions are beginning to invest a lot in training, making sure that the skills are upscaled for a lot of IT people are running the security sections. A lot of banks are now beginning to realize that there's a need for a CISO in place. This is a person in charge of security for most financial institutions to make sure that most things are there too, and therefore they can actually put a team together that does all the monitoring, that does all the detection, that knows how to react to such incidences. So, and there's a lot of money that is required for such things to be put in place. But we've seen a lot of investments in those areas as well. But we've also seen a lot of financial institutions invest in a lot of other technologies, by the way. So there are technologies that now will be able to put the powers into the customer. For instance, there are technologies that are being considered, that are being done in some other places where a customer on their phone, for instance, can switch off all the transactions related to their card or transactions related to their mobile on the platform of the bank. And they will decide when to switch on what type of transaction when they are doing it. What that does is that it gives a lot of control to the customer themselves to be able to say, look, I can stop what I want, I can limit, I can put my own limits, and I can decide when a transaction can happen on my account. So if you steal a card or if you then do a SIM swap, what you find is that the original owner before that possibly has locked up all the transaction on their particular platform related to them. And all those technologies are actually being put in place. There are a lot of fraud-related tools that actually do very sophisticated analytics in terms of identifying the patterns of transactions that happen in Zambia and outside the country, be able to put all these things together and be able to ascertain that this transaction doesn't look genuine and therefore automatically go ahead and block it. So all those are technologies and all those things are all being looked at from financial institutions to try and make sure that we curb all these threats. But then again, I'll still go back and say, you see, staying on top of security requires Kaizen, continuous improvements. These guys are always ahead of the pack, and so you need to be keeping up. And what some of these certifications then allow you to do is that you get another pair of eyes, other people that give you insight in terms of what they've seen somewhere else and ask you to then conform, and that helps you out because you pretty much can't know everything. I hope that gives clarity to that issue. Thanks, Victoria, for now. I'll stop there.
I think that's quite insightful, Akim. Thank you so much. And just one comment in the chat. One person is concerned that the registers that are being collected for contact tracing, and as far as COVID is concerned, may also be a source of cyber threat. Now, under a minute, are you able to comment on that? And then we'll get to all the panelists to give your final word to the discussion before we wind up.
It's a valid point to a certain extent, how we wish we could digitize all those processes, but you know, all this digitization at any one point usually has a cost that goes with it. But yeah, to a certain extent, a certain part of that information could actually be used in all sorts of ways by people that have got malicious intentions. And maybe it's something that we could relook at it and see, are there any other better ways? But remember the way COVID came to us. It came to us, boom, short period to react, and putting in all processes and measures in place could have not happened at the same time. But yeah, to a certain point, yes, it's a valid point that we need to look at and see what other measures and improvements that can put around that.
Thank you so much, Akim. And before I get to Leonard to give his final word, probably to each of the panelists, thank you so much. I think the discussion has been very, very insightful. I'll ask you for a comment under 30 seconds to this discussion, what should the participants, we've had over 100 people in the call, and what should they go away with in as far as this important discussion is concerned? I'll start with Nawa to give your final remarks, please.
Okay, under 30 seconds, I'll start with the idea. I think Akim did mention it. So I'm sitting on the committee that's looking into the new digital identity systems. I can assure you around October, November, you're gonna see something happening around that. We are moving digital. And in addition to that, the new laws actually spoke into the public key infrastructure. Without mentioning so much, I know most of you are IT, but this is going to be a form that will ensure authentication to a higher or newer level on the other end. So rest assured, those issues that were brought up, I think, especially by the banks, in terms of identity, we are opening up from government perspective. You're going to be able to use certain data for verification. I think final notes from my end, it's ZICTA cannot do this by themselves. We are working with stakeholders like yourselves. If we can collaborate, we've got free services from ZICTA's point of view. I know Mr. Paul had mentioned that probably the expertise in Zambia, I can rest assure you, we've never lost any digital forensic case in court since I joined the regulator in 2012. We are actually experts. You can write any malware. I can assure you, even in my personal capacity, I will reverse engineer any program written. I pretty much do understand. So me and my team, experts, rest assured, but we need your collaboration. We've been talking about working with other entities. We're working with Bank of Zambia. That I can assure you, there's no friction between us. As maybe I saw someone asking in those lines, we are both government and we're working for the same cause. So you're gonna be seeing a lot of directives as well as collaboration requests. Please open up your doors. We want to go digital in a secure and safe environment for everyone, not to cut yourselves or scare your customers. No. So thank you very much. And I think I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Nawa, for that reassurance. I'll get to Paul. For your final comments, please, what should the audience go away with in this important discussion?
I think we are moving, and we're moving in the right direction. I would like to assure the listeners today that with what's been said and what's being done, what's in the offing, we'll be in a better space. I think that the worrisome time is between now and then, where we have to probably make do with what we have. But I'm sure towards the end of the year, we should be in a better position and avert a lot of these inconveniencing hackings and cybercrime activity.
Thank you so much, Paul. Chris, what should the people go away with?
I think there was a comment around the insurance, and now I think did try to speak to it. I know for a fact that Madison at some point was offering that insurance in Zambia. I think the major issue was how you quantify your cybersecurity costs. But in case you are interested, I know that Madison will offer it, so you could reach out. I also wanted to comment on the national ID. Like now I say, this is a problem that I'm aware will be launching soon. We have made contacts and also asked that from the MNO point of view, there has to be some form of dedication around having their own kind of KYC. You have one person who has 10 SIM cards, and these SIM cards are then being used to defraud accounts. So yes, there'll be a national ID, which I'm hoping we can then have, because maybe they will expose the web interface for us to integrate. But on the MNO side, I think something also needs to happen. Thank you so much, Victoria, for the opportunity. I think for the viewers, what I just want you to take away is that cybersecurity is real. In the financial industry, there was a question around what is the state where we I would like to say that it is developing in terms of our cybersecurity resilience, both as an institution and as a nation. So, but that it starts with you as an individual. If you compromise, even things that you do on your phone, for example, these Android phones, and people like downloading quite a lot of things that they don't understand. You want to download a Zoom application, which is created by maybe Senao and Chris. Certainly, you want to be careful about such things. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'll get to Akim. What are your final comments?
Thank you, Victoria. It's been very insightful. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Leonard. My final comment is that, yeah, I like 1.9 in security. There's no security without you, otherwise it becomes secret. So, and that please, as part of sending a message out there, please be cognizant that don't trust anything you receive in the world of cyber security. Anything you receive, don't trust, verify. Call your financial institution to verify what you've received. Mostly they will not be asking you for PINs. They will not be asking you to for a password. That's not the most common, but you can then verify. But otherwise, let's research more. And I want people to know that they can be assured that as financial institution, we are not sitting idle. There's a lot of research going in. There's a lot of investment that is going in to make sure that customer information remains secure. But then again, it's security. So you need to be keeping on and keeping on. It's continuous kaizen. Yeah, thank you.
Trust only yourself. That is very, very valid in as far as cyber attacks are concerned. Mutsunge, what would be your final words?
Thank you. I think my final words will really border on the vulnerability. So I think accountability, responsibility. Let's be vigilant. Let's click on safe links. Let's not click on things that we are not sure about, because that's where it all starts from. And then secondly, continuous awareness is very important. Not awareness seasonal, but at least let's have programs where on a weekly basis, we start finding out something about cyber, using all the channels. We can use text messages and all the channels that people use. You can actually do that, because that way we will be, changing the mindset, because what we need right now is a mindset shift. And I think I'll also add on to what Nawa said around the regulator cannot do certain things without our collaboration, because remember, we're in the front line, we provide them with feedback. So they're merely providing oversight, and then we are the guys who are in the firing range. So we need to collaborate with the regulators as and when they come and they need what we need to provide them with the requisite assistance. But I think aside that, cyber risks are real and they are with us. They are with us to stay. So we really need to be vigilant about them. Thank you.
Cyber risk is with us and here to stay. Quite alarming, but that's the truth. And I think the truth sets one free. I'll ask Leonard for his final comments before I summarize and close the meeting. Leonard, what would be your final word as our moderator?
Well, indeed, just to thank the good insights from the panelists. I think we've had a very good sharing in terms of where we are as a nation. Clearly put it, cyber risks are real. We are proactively trying to manage them. There's no assurance that they will be stopped, but with continuous improvement in systems, in capabilities, we can mitigate. That's what I'm hearing, we can mitigate. And also just to thank the participants. I think they were very good questions. But beside that, I've seen quite some very good and positive feedback in terms of how we can reposition maybe the next series on cyber issues. So from me, I just want to thank everyone and to wish you a blessed rest of the day.
Thank you, Leonard. You've been a fantastic moderator. And I think just to sum up this important conversation for today, we've taken note. Indeed, like Leonard said, we'll invite more people, experts in the industry on this important chat. We've been requested to include auditors, people like the Zambia police and legal experts to just widen the scope. So I think this important conversation will be coming back to you very, very soon. Now, in summary, from the almost 2 hours that we've been talking, all what we've learned, technically is that cyber risk is with us. It can only get worse. So we cannot afford to relax, and it doesn't matter what type of an institution you are. You can be a financial institution, you can be an SME, you can be an individual. Cyber risk or cyber attacks are on the way to you. And we also heard that it's not a matter of if it will happen. It's now an issue of when will it happen, and if it happens, when it happens, are we ready for it? And we cannot stop it. We can only, reduce the risk. And the other element that we've really noted strongly is the need for collaboration, in mitigating this cyber risk. And also, I'd love to hear that Madison Insurance here in Zambia is providing some form of cyber risk insurance. So I think that question that came earlier on has been answered. And also there is need for continuous sensitization, and a forum such as this one is meant for such, because we know that under a pandemic such as a healthy one, COVID-19, it has seriously evolved. It's now a pandemic that has so many faces, and most of it is the economic side, financial issues. Now we're talking cyber in relation to a pandemic, so things can only get worse, not only from a healthy perspective, but also from the IT perspective with the innovations that are coming in. So information sharing, dissemination of information is quite critical. And I think what I noted also is that it's important to disseminate this information on the same platform that hackers are using. Social media, for instance, is one of the platforms that hackers are using, and it's important to visit such information centers to disseminate. We've also noted a huge amount of loss in terms of revenue to the country, such as Zambia, in cyber attacks. We noted from Zikta to a tune of 50 million kwacha, and that's not even the full amount, because maybe some of the cases haven't been reported yet, and we are encouraged by the regulator to continue reporting such cases so that we can have the full understanding of the damage that cyber attacks are doing. I've been Victoria Chandamumba, your host for this particular session, and I've been privileged to be with you on this panel with Leonard Mwanza, a colleague and partner from the Bankers Association. Thank you so much to all participants. We've had over 100 people on the call this afternoon, and I think there are a lot of takeaways. Please watch this space for more insightful discussions such as this. We're just building momentum to ensure that all the critical areas on this particular topic are covered. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm signing out. Have a blessed day and keep safe. Bye-bye.